Hello and welcome to the meeting room out of office here at the Meeting Show 2025. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Sasha Frieze. She's an event strategist and the author of forthcoming book, The Chief Event Officer's Playbook. Sasha, thank you so much for joining us today.
So it's a pleasure. It's great to be here, and there's a lot of great energy on site.
We're glad to hear it. Yeah, I can feel the vibe. It's brilliant.
Absolutely.
Sasha, I want to start. Tell us about your forthcoming book.
Absolutely. So the Chief Event Officer's Playbook really takes the ideas about how to create transformational events. I actually met my publisher around 7 years ago and started thinking about these ideas. And what's become clear to me over nearly 30 years in the events industry is that I am taking operational excellence for granted. There are a ton of people who really know how to operate slickly, and there's a number of great books about that. But what I'm really interested in looking at is looking at the strategic purpose of events and how you interweave events into the strategy of a business. And so the Chief Event Officer's Playbook is about event planners, organisers, raising their game, and also chief marketing officers, boards, looking at events as one of the key drivers of their marketing strategy. When events are really well structured with a clear purpose and narrative and are interwoven into the strategic direction of the business, that's where the real magic happens. And actually what we see in recent research reports is, I think it was the Visibo report, 83% of, 1,500 event planners who were interviewed early in 25, 83% said that live events are where their organizations and clients grow community, make connections. And that's something that has really changed since the pandemic.
Oh, brilliant. Some really interesting themes there in the book then. I want to come back to community in event, but first I just want to talk to you about what a chief event officer, what do they actually do? So is it someone who is formerly known as an event planner, for example, or are we kind of like reinventing the wheel here?
I think the chief event officer, there are people with a job title chief event officer, but what I see it as, and there may be that things change and many more people get the job title. I see it as an opportunity for people to own the chief event officer mindset. And so take that strategic approach. And so whether you are an event planner, an event director, an event strategist, an event organizer, an event assistant, rather than taking orders from people in the business and, okay, let's go away and organize, that breakfast briefing for 100 people, learn the language of the business, understand what the drivers of the business are, and crucially, how events can help deliver that success. And I believe taking on that chief event officer mindset and talking the language of the business with the senior with the C-suite and the senior people in the business, that is the way for events to make a real difference, but also for event planners, chief event officers to really raise their game and improve their careers.
Interesting. And you've used that phrase twice now, the raising the game, sort of leveling up. So you're saying that we need to go from just taking the brief that's been given to you and delivering the brief, brilliant, in the job title, to really understanding the nuances of the event in hand and to really understand the language of business.
Absolutely. And I think, that's a really great way to look at it, which is, whilst it's great to take a brief, what I really want to encourage people to do is to interrogate that brief, to have a kickoff meeting, to sit around the table with the senior stakeholders in the business, get them involved up front and work through the key questions about what the purpose of the event is. What's the transformation that event delivers? And that's really the key thing. The world of events has changed, certainly in the time that I've been working in events. When I started out, events actually were pretty much a product. They all looked the same and, they were a little bit undifferentiated. They became a service. Then people started talking about an experience. And then, people started talking about emotional engagement. And that development has absolutely happened. But the thing that I think is really changing now, and I think the pandemic to some degree kickstarted that, is that an event has to create a transformation. After people spend quite a few years doing Zoom and crisps and sitting at home, your event needs to really engage with your participants and create a value experience for them that's truly transformative. Otherwise, they're not going to come. I've worked on a lot of association events. the 57th annual congress of your association isn't always a good enough reason for people to come out of the office anymore. And so creating that real value proposition about what the transformation is about, the difference that you make. And also, within the playbook, I've got, there's 10 questions within the playbook, under 4 core headings. And the first question is that really big question about why are you doing that event? And that really falls into 3 areas. What's the journey? What's the transformation? What's the journey? And what's the purpose? And that question about what that transformation is a really powerful question. And crucially, it's about who it's for.
Do you think you could give us some examples of transformation, the journey, and the purpose then? Because I imagine there might be some, under-resourced and overstretched event planners out there who are thinking, I don't know what that transformation can look like. I don't know what the purpose is really. So have you got any examples you can share with us?
So, I think what I'm really talking about is a process for people to go through to really get their head around what the transformation is. And even if you're under-resourced, you can still be a strategic thinker.
Okay.
This is not about having enough resource to deliver. This is about raising your game to be a strategic thinker who understands what that transformation is. So, for example, one of the things an event planner might do is sit down with the team and work through who is the transformation for? And that's really key. Is it for individuals? Is it for individual attendees or individual speakers? Is it for organizations? Corporate events very often have an agenda, which is around what is the what is the change we're making for our organization? Is it a user conference for a big tech platform? Do we want to engage all the people? Do we want to, is it a business development play? Are we trying to engage more customers? How do we measure that? For individuals, what kind of journey might they go on? How do we want to change them? And then there's a really crucial piece about sectors, which I think is fascinating. To some degree, the meeting show is working on transforming the sector of meetings and events. But for those organizations that have, a policy agenda or a particular, strategy that they're working on, making the difference for a whole sector can be really powerful. An example of that is that I worked a few years ago on the Tech Talent Charter, which actually, was a DE&I program really looking at engaging organizations in increasing the diversity of people working in tech. And to some degree, it was a campaigning organization. And so the transformation there was about the sector. And the events that we helped them organize were very much about delivering that transformation, talking to government, talking to big organizations, signing people up to the charter. And one of the tools that we used was a selfie frame at the event. So we created visual assets, that flew across social media that helped transform the sector. So that's one small example, but there are many.
That's a great example. In amongst that answer, you use the phrase strategic thinker. And I think that's so valuable in this day and age, because I think a lot with information overload, which you touched upon, and we kind of go with what we're told a lot of the time. So to take a step back and actually be a strategic thinker. Do you think that is the new era of successful event planners then?
So there are very many successful event planners out there already, but I think there is a real opportunity now for people to take their great operational expertise and their logistics expertise and to respond to all the drivers, that have changed the events industry in the world. I mean, information overload is a really great example. Events used to be that place where it was quite hard to get hold of information, and you would come to the event and somebody who curated, a great gathering for you to hear presentations, great speakers, great conversations. Now there's too much information, actually, and what people are really looking for from events is great content and conversations, connections, and that curated content. But crucially, what people really also want is a depth of experience. Part of what the transformation is making the event truly experiential. And I think part of that strategic approach is understanding those key principles. and how to design and curate events and gatherings that have the attendees, the participants, at the heart of the story.
Fantastic. Sasha, lastly then, why should people buy your forthcoming book? And also, how can they access it?
So, thank you. Well, I've just finished copy edits this week, and the book will be published in November. It's available on Amazon. It is actually available for pre-order on Amazon already. And people can contact me on LinkedIn. And I think the Chief Event Officer's Playbook is really about an opportunity to create events that are the new era of how the business world works, how to help individuals, organizations, and sectors transform and create real purposeful value.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, I'll definitely be getting myself a copy. It sounds brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a good rest of the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Holly.